Hello, I'm back with another book recommendation, and this one is a must-have for anyone who is interested in vintage perfume or vintage perfume bottles. If you find yourself scrolling on eBay like I do sometimes and you're wondering how valuable things actually are and what time period they're from, often on eBay sellers won't say exactly what era their perfume bottle is from, or maybe even other things, because they don't want to be liable in case they've made a mistake. So they'll tell you to do your own research, and they'll give you, identifying features like any engravings. They'll show you the bottom of the bottle. If they have the packaging, they'll show you that as well. But they won't actually date their bottles. They are expecting you to do that yourself. And there are lots of websites out there that can help you do that. But this book is really great as a resource, and it's more A to Z for perfume bottles and bottle collecting. The way that I found this book is I went onto my library's website, and in the catalog I searched for perfume, and this is one of the books that came out, and I read it cover to cover the first time I got it, and since then I've taken it out of library here and there and just referred to the parts that I thought were interesting. The really great thing about it is that there are tons and tons of pictures so that you can actually see examples of some of the perfume bottles. So the book is called Perfume, Cologne, and Scent Bottles. It is specifically for collectors, and I'll put a link to it in the description box. It's specifically for collectors. So if you're interested in collecting, or you're interested in seeing what kinds of collections there could be, this is an amazing resource. Now, I will say that it focuses on European and American designs and really starts from the Victorian period onwards. It is arranged chronologically, but there are specific chapters on different bottle designers or countries. For example, there's a whole chapter on Lalique in here, which just shows you how important his work was to, the perfume bottle design. He started off as a jewelry designer, and then he started making things out of glass, and then perfume companies commissioned him to create bottles for their perfumes, and then he also came out with his own products as well, of course, in his own bottles. So that's really, really interesting. He was really important for the Art Deco movement and furthered that along, and also known for furthering the Egyptian revival style. So in that time period in the 1920s, people were really interested in art from other countries, or just other countries in general. Like, for example, they were interested in India, they were interested in Greece, in Rome, but they weren't really able to travel to those places. And so because they were so, enamored with the idea of the foreign, there was a lot of art that was replicating art from those places, and Egypt included. And so some of Lalique's perfume bottles was Egyptian revival because it replicated that Egyptian style, but of course it was new. So for example, our favorite perfume, Habanita by Molinard, the frieze on it was designed by Lalique, and I don't know, I feel like it kind of makes this bottle a little bit special because they've kept that design, whereas a lot of other perfume designers, they either don't make perfume anymore, or they've changed their bottle design so much that it's not in the Egyptian revival anymore. So the frieze on it was designed by Lalique, and it's really a nice remnant of that time period. So that is something that I learned from this book. The other thing that's in here, there's actually a whole section on purse bottles. There's a whole section on different types of stoppers. So for example, fan stoppers were really popular back then. So, or not back then, but at a certain time in the 1940s, the fan stoppers were really popular. So there's a whole section on fan stoppers, just on fan stoppers. There's also a whole section on atomizers. And atomizers weren't really used for perfumes until the 1930s or 1940s. Really, the 1940s onwards is where they were more popular. And originally they were glass bulbs, or sorry, rubber bulbs, and covered in crocheted or knitted silk. So that would have been handmade. So there's lots of examples of atomizers. I have a few perfume bottles with atomizers. I would not recommend them. Do not ever buy actual perfume with atomizers. This was from Bond Number 9. Yeah, Bond Number 9 from a press trip, and they had like a refill station, and you could choose the perfume and have it in a vintage glass bottle. This is the one I chose. I thought it was a really neat concept, but you can see that all that's left in here is oil. There's no perfume, and I don't even think I really even wore this perfume. I just got home and I didn't actually really like it. It was very fruity. So do not recommend. And even if you don't have something from, this was like, obviously this is just a bottle that you can open, so there's going to be more evaporation, but I also have a bottle from Prada, and this is Prada L'Eau Ombre, again with an atomizer, and all that's left in the bottom is oil, and the alcohol has evaporated. So this one I actually have worn a lot, so I'm not too choked about it, and I think I could still find it if I wanted to, but yeah, the oil does evaporate if you have this atomizer over a number of years. I know the Guerlain, the old Guerlain L'Art et Le Métier bottles, they had this type of atomizer option, and I've seen people selling it. I would never buy that because you are just going to lose the alcohol, and then you're going to be left with the oil. It's going to change the composition over time. Not worth it, in my opinion. So I wouldn't get those. So, and the other interesting story about atomizers is that they were actually invented in the early 1900s, or earlier than 1940, to serve a different purpose. And that was doctors at that time were treating throat infections by swabbing the treatment on the patient's throat. So it would be either petroleum jelly or something else, and then they needed something that could spray it directly into their throat instead of them sticking a swab in their throat every time. And so someone invented atomizers to be able to do that, and then eventually they started being used for perfume as well. So that's kind of cool. Thought that was a cool story. Like I said, there's a whole section on commercial bottles. So commercial bottles meaning like more mainstream bottles that we think of today. So by Chanel, by Dior, by Coty, of course, Guerlain. One of the things that is a bit of an oversight is they talked about a really rare collectible Guerlain bottle for Champs-Élysées, that perfume, and it's called the turtle bottle because it literally looks like a turtle shell, and the neck of the turtle is the neck of the perfume bottle, and the flat part of the shell is where the label goes, but there's no picture of that turtle bottle in this book. So I thought that was a bit of an oversight because I would have liked to see it. I had to end up Googling it. It literally looks like a turtle. But it's a bottle from 1904. I've never seen it on eBay. I've never seen it on Instagram. I think probably it's one of those things that is very exclusive and is probably in a more high-end special auction, like maybe by an auction house like Sotheby's or Christie's or something like that. So that's what I'm thinking. Of course, those bottles, a lot of those bottles were designed and made by Baccarat. So there's lots of information about Baccarat in here, and Baccarat bottles, and how you would go about identifying them. They were usually numbered. There was, really interesting glass design advancements that were at that time, like making colored glass, or making the glass blue, or making the stopper blue. Of course, the bottle for Shalimar was, so well regarded because that stopper was blue, and that was something that other glass makers didn't know how to do, but Baccarat figured out how to do it. Apparently, the only way you could do it was by making a hole in the stopper, and he figured out how to do it without making that hole, or you couldn't see the hole if he was making a hole, and that is still a secret. Nobody knows how he actually did it. So that's interesting, and lots of really good information in here, lots of pictures, lots of things that, you know, if you're interested in perfume or even collecting. Here's the Shalimar bottle and a bunch of other bottles. There's jet black bottles. And you know, it doesn't have to be that you're collecting things that are super rare and super expensive. Sometimes if you're the type of person that goes to flea markets, or you're a person that likes antiquing and you've seen bottles and you've ended up bringing some home, maybe you just want to have a look through this just to see what else there is out there, or maybe to help you identify what you have, because who knows, maybe it deserves to be, you know, protected and passed down and taken care of instead of forgotten about, because that's what sometimes happens when people you know, pass their bottles on to the next generation. One of the things that I really liked is at the end of the book, there's this whole couple pages on bottle care and tips. And one of the tips that they tell collectors is that, you know, when you're starting out, you buy things that are maybe a little bit more affordable and smaller. And then eventually, as you advance in your collecting, you would sell or trade some of your less valuable bottles and purchase one really more valuable bottle, or something that's a little bit more special to you, right? Or something that's just more expensive. You just level up your collection in that way by selling a whole bunch and then using all that money to get that one thing that you really want. And I think that's what a lot of perfume collectors do as well, where, you know, maybe even unknowingly you decide that you're going to get rid of some smaller things that maybe aren't as good, and then you're going to save up that money and then purchase that one big bottle of perfume that you've had your eye on, that you've wanted forever, and you can now get it after you unload some of the other stuff. So I know I've definitely done that. I've done that recently too. So that's a good tip. I think people do that unknowingly, or sometimes people don't realize that they can do that, but it's a good way to go about collecting. If you're starting out, you start smaller, and then you eventually go bigger as you progress, and you realize how valuable things are, and what things you want in your collection to have forever. Oh, and the last thing, I had no idea that bottles had patents. So there is a whole section just on patents, on bottle patents. And of course, companies ripped each other off and tried to copy bottle designs, but you know, they would have to change something because there were patents on the bottle design. So I thought that was good information to have. Not that I'm ever going to be designing a bottle, but it's interesting. I had no idea that there were patents involved in these bottles. And of course, you know, you have to draw out and show each element of the bottle so that it can't be copied. And I mean, for example, in 1937, there was a patent filed for L'Heure Bleue by Guerlain, which was actually introduced in 1913. That's on this page right here. So much information. I learn something new every time I pick this book up, every time I take it out of the library. I think everyone should find it and see if they can have a look at it. And of course, I'll leave a link to it below. You just never know when it could come in handy and when you might want to see how much something is worth. There's prices in here too, but this is not a new book, so I'm sure prices have changed. Probably gone up, if anything, in the time that this book has been written. But underneath each picture, they do have the date, the manufacturer of the bottle, and how much it was purchased for at that time, or listed for at that time. So that's good information to know. Okay, that's it from me. Let me know if you have any questions or what you think, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.